How do I sound?
You sound great.
All right.
It's a good
Hey,
mic.
it's good to see you in person. It's interesting that I've never seen you before until now, because since we
Hmm.
do our sessions in phone. Um, I wanted to, in this session, not talk about love or relationships,
Hmm.
or anything like that. I wanted to talk about all the other areas of my life,
Hmm.
and as you know, I'm 49. I'm gonna turn 50 in less than a month,
Hmm.
and I feel like I don't think I'm going through a crisis. That's definitely not the word. It doesn't feel like a crisis, but I'm definitely going through this kind of awakening, almost like a reevaluation or a life audit. And I thought maybe we could go into it through like a death psychology union lens.
Sure, we can do that.
Obviously, it's what you do.
Can before we do that, can I just confirm that you are recording and that you're okay? You understand that your confidentiality could be compromised because you might plan to publish this and you're aware of that.
Yes, it will be. It will
Yeah.
be compromised, and also
Yeah. Okay.
I want you to understand that thousands of people will be listening to the session.
I'm
Although,
fine with that. I just
yeah,
I
okay,
just
good,
want you to understand also that I'm not profiting from this by the recording in any way. This is
right,
just for you and
right,
you're for you alone.
yes,
Okay. Um,
yeah.
uh,
Let's talk like no one's listening. That's what I plan to do.
all right. All right. So, where do you want to start?
Man, where can I start? I want to start with so when I think about so what I've been thinking about a lot is a half century into my life almost, no longer being in this kind of desperate sky is falling state, which I was in for most of my life. And so I feel like in the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, I finally hit play, because my life has been kind of on pause mentally.
Mhm.
And now I'm getting to a point where, okay, I'm no longer in fight or flight. What does that mean? How do I want to live my life? What do I want to do? And it's not that I want to make these big drastic changes, right? It's not like I'm going to change careers or live in a different country or anything like that. But I do feel this kind of um, man. I feel almost like a rebirth or a resurrection, and it's something I haven't felt since my divorce 12 years ago.
How long has that been? Have you been feeling that?
I've been feeling it kind of recently, and um, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's going to ripple into my life. I just know that um, I feel itchy.
Like you want to do something? Like you
I
want to
don't know
get
if it's
something
I want to
accomplished?
do something. You know what comes to my mind is the word. I'm due for a life audit.
A life audit. What is a
Yeah.
life audit? So what is that? What would that look like?
Uh, I think logically it would be looking at all the different areas of my life
Hmm.
and reevaluating. Um, I wonder how much of my life is still um, tracing old blueprints, right? I wonder how much of my life is still lined with shoulds instead of me really uh, listening to my truth. So whether it is writing books, creativity, I mean even this podcast, anything that I'm doing from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, just kind of auditing. And does it line up with the new kind of becoming me, right?
Right. And there's also an inherent paradox because that little list that you just read out is also kind of a should. You know,
Mm,
so it's almost like you're stuck in using an old framework. Like the old framework is, you've always been a very goal oriented guy. I still
yeah,
see, I get that image of you, sitting in the cafe for 10 years banging out screenplays
yeah.
and trying to get there. And now you're much more mature and you're doing way, way better, but you're still kind of using that old blueprint. And I think
Mm.
that one of the new blueprints that might avail you is one that is not a blueprint, in the
Oh,
sense that
interesting.
a much more open-ended. The paradox is that it's important to have goals and it's important to have
Right.
directionality, but at the same time and simultaneously, it is also important to have no directionality and no goals, and to be open-ended and open up to whatever is coming, which is an impossible thing,
So
but
wait, so okay, so
necessary.
you're saying the fact that I even am trying to audit my life is a blueprint in itself, right? Like the
Yeah, and is also indicative of the old blueprint.
because why? Because I want something better, or because it's kind of measured, or
Yeah,
what makes it the
yeah, because
old?
it's measured, it's hierarchical. You want something better,
Mm,
you're reaching, and there's nothing wrong with that.
right, right.
But at the same time, because I think what comes with maturity is our ability to grasp paradoxes such as the importance of, you know, the Taoist philosophy has this concept, I believe it's called Wu Wei. I
Mm-hmm.
might be mispronouncing it, where it's the idea of moving towards something without any desire to obtain it. It's sort of a paradoxical state of advancement without by remaining still.
Mm.
And I wonder if your blueprint is not just about, and I'm happy to evaluate stuff with you and look for specific things, but also I would caution, or I wouldn't caution, it's the wrong word. I would just encourage you to think about being ready to throw all of it out at any moment, to
Mm.
reinvent it all at any moment, that it's all kind of, it's more of a slurry, it's more of a fluid thing than a static thing.
The word fluid resonates with me like big time.
Mm-hmm.
Neon in neon these days, it's a word. No, really, it's a fluid is because when I think about fluid, I think about because I'm very impatient, right? So I think about
Mm-hmm.
slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the old me was more like flood, so fluid. There's
That's funny.
there's poetry in fluid. There's
Mm-hmm.
also no labels. There's no this idea of containment or trying to force. And so and this is, I don't really want to get into relationships in this session, but when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to love, I'm also thinking more fluid. When it comes to my expression with friends, when it comes to creativity, work, the word fluid does, it resonates with me.
Yeah, yeah. That's
So
good.
I find this really interesting. That just the fact that I do want to do an audit. When and when I think of audit, I think of taxes. I think of left brain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's measurement, there's numbers, there's evaluation. So um, you're saying that is remnants of the old. So what if there was no audit? What if um, there was just it seems like you're saying there's just being and staying away from measurement, right?
Kind of. There's sort of a, well, it's a really it's a, again, a paradoxical state that it is. I do want to audit. I do want to look at the things, but I need you not to be as entrenched in them
Mm,
as you were when you were younger. That let's do the audit. Let's look at what John wants, but let's also be aware um, that this is not set in stone. That this is that it's almost more like by auditing, and it's less about achievement and it's more about noticing, I suppose, at this level of a stage in our lives where it's like we look at something and just by looking at it and thinking about it, it seems to transform itself.
mm.
So
So
it's go ahead.
no, so what would that look like in life? Like, what would that look like in kind of the
That
day
would,
to day?
yeah, sure, that would look like so if I'm like when I'm blocked creatively,
Mm-hmm.
let's say I'm trying to write something and I just can't seem to get it out, instead of fighting it, instead of sort of chipping away at it and setting like a goal, I'm going to write for 3 hours a day and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to do it this way. I might do those things, but mostly what I'll do is I'll notice, wow, Ben's having a really hard time getting some writing done. What's that
Mm-hmm.
about for him? What's blocking him? And kind of start to observe it and look at it in a new way and not try to take action so much as just notice that there's a block there and kind of surrender to the, like, in other words, address the problem in a way that it wouldn't have before, instead of attacking it head on, kind of like getting to trying to figure out what's in the problem, or what does the problem mean to me. Just by acknowledging that there's a big problem there and doing nothing can sometimes, you'll go to sleep one night having thought about the problem, journaled about it, talked to a friend about it, chipped away at it a little bit, and then let it go and sort of detach from it completely. And it's like you
Mm-hmm.
go to bed at night with no kind of attachment to the outcome. That's really the thing, is not being so attached to the outcome. And you'll wake up and you'll know what the solution is.
Mm,
I think it's about not attaching yourself to outcomes. I think is the main thing. Like moving towards a thing, but not being so invested in like, oh, I'm going to win. I'm going to get across the finish line. But just
right.
being surrendered to the idea that yeah, this may not work out, or this may not go the way I planned it to.
Yeah, so easier said than done. But
Mm-hmm.
I hear what you're saying, and I have been trying to swim that way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I most of my life have been tying the external to myself, my happy, my worth, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, that makes you feel powerless.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so maybe what's next for you? What's next for me is not an evaluation, but um, just noticing, and like a flow,
Mm-hmm.
the word chi, fluid,
Mm-hmm.
judo, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, as Bruce Lee says, be like water. Like all of that resonates with me, and so
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not about a life audit or reevaluating. At the same time, there's a part of me that is very goal oriented or very
Yeah.
ambitious. I work hard, to build something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do I keep that
Well,
side of me, but also be
well, that's the
fluid?
thing is that you honor it by doing it. So I have to in order to improve at jiu-jitsu, I have to do the things I've always done, which is eat right and get enough sleep and drill the moves and show up to class. But to improve these days, I've had to do some detachment from my own ego, which is going to class and releasing the idea of trying to beat everybody. Because as a
Mm,
black belt, it's harder because everyone's trying to kill you because you're a black belt. Like, oh, it's like they want your head on a wall.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And
what if you're competitive? What if one of the things that you are doing is competing in tournaments? I mean, you know.
then you have to save the competition for the competition. And you have to, in order to improve in class, you've got to park your ego at the door and be less attached to the outcome. And even in competitions, I've heard that the people who really do win kind of go to the competition to have fun and just
Right.
see it as another day of training.
But that doesn't mean
And
that you're not pushing yourself in training.
it
Correct? I
doesn't.
mean,
So
to get
that's the
right.
concept of woo wee. It's like you're moving towards the thing, but you're not as attached to the outcome.
Mm,
You're just not as like last night I went and I just it's really difficult when you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 16, 17 years and someone who's like purple belt or a blue belt who's 20 years old scores a point on you or even beats you because your ego can't take it because you're getting old and stuff. And so last night I really took a breath, stepped on the mat and said, okay, I'm really gonna just try to let go of that. And I
mm,
did way better.
right. Right.
And I think there's something that when we get into this sort of fluid state where we're not as attached to outcomes, but we're moving towards the outcome, I think we're more creative.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're more nimble on our feet. And I think, yeah, then you can, and the paradox is that then you can pick the goals and move towards them. But it's your state of mind as you're moving towards the goal that's so important. You know, it is, John, is when we get too prescriptive and too hierarchical and too goal driven, we become rigid, we become brittle, and we
Yeah.
break. It's like that concept of anti-fragility that we talked about, or anti-fragile systems like a spider web can break and then be repaired very easily, right? And there's just this, you've got to be anti-fragile. You've got to be able to, oh, whoops, that didn't work so well. That's okay. And that's not easy to do, but it's a practice. It's a spiritual practice, I think. So I'm not asking
Uh,
you to not work towards your goals. I'm not saying
right.
that.
Right. No, I love what you're saying. It reminds me of Buddhism. It reminds me of not getting hooked. It reminds me of healthy distance.
Yeah. And
And
are you familiar? Are you familiar with the Tao Te Ching? We talked about that.
now is the Tao, is that who's the guy? So I used to listen to
Lao Tzu.
Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer.
I don't know, but the Tao Te Ching was written by Lao Tzu, a couple thousand
Right,
years
right.
ago.
He studied that for a long time, and I remember when I was
Yeah.
going through a divorce, I would have a styrofoam coffee in one hand because I couldn't afford the $10 pour over, a donut in the other hand, and then I had the now I drink $10 pour over, and I'm proud of it. And then I have the earbuds, and I would listen to a lot of Wayne Dyer. I almost felt a disconnection to him, as if like he was the dad I never had, or like the He
Oh,
comes off as
cool.
very kind of human, and and but
That's
but
neat.
his whole thing was the Tao. That was
Yeah.
and he studied that a lot. So I think you guys are talking about the same thing.
Maybe. And so being in the Tao is being in harmony. There's this story about
Right.
a village where it wasn't raining, and this rainmaker comes, and he says, "Look, the problem isn't that it isn't. I'm not going to bring the rain. The problem with the town is the town is outside of the Tao. It's outside of the balance of nature, which is why it isn't raining." And so a lot of times, um, when we have when we're brittle and rigid and we're driven by ego needs and I've got to get the thing, we get kicked out of the Tao, and the natural order of things ceases to function.
Mm. Hmm.
It's like, I mean, a kind of a crude example would be somebody who's trying to get a date with somebody. If they try really, really hard, it's like,
Right.
eh.
Right.
But if you
Right.
don't try, it kind of works. And the same thing with a job interview. If you go in with like, yeah, I'm detached from it, and you just you'll perform better, you'll just do better. So when somebody has a really strong ego desire for something, I just don't think we function at our peak. I think we come in just not working as well.
How do we know what is ego? What is ego desire? Um,
Yeah, that's a
and
hard one.
and what's not? So let me give you an example.
Uh-huh.
I recently posted on Instagram. I did an ice plunge in my pool, and I came out, and I was naked, and so no one was around, and so I decided to. The sun was out, so I decided to get on my back, and I put I pointed my taint at the sun, and I
Uh-huh.
did some I don't know what it's called, perennial tanning, or something like that. And I did it for a few seconds, for a new experience, and just for laughs. Took a photo of it, posted it on Instagram, and so here's
Oh boy.
it's from the side, so you can't really see anything, but I am naked, and it got a lot of it's got like over 1,000 comments and 20,000 likes, and
Oh boy.
now here's where ego comes in. So that was, to me, that was very um, does very John Kim. It was just very me, not thinking. It does I post, I document my story, whatever. The ego comes in when I saw that became popular, and
Mm-hmm.
then I boosted the post,
Mm. Yeah.
which is now like analytical left brain. If you see a post doing well, you boost it. But now
Mm.
it's ego driven, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, for something like that, I could see it. I could see where, okay, the post was organic. You just did this. It wasn't planned. You posted it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of took off, and now you want to boost it. Now you want to
Mm-hmm.
amplify it. That
Mm-hmm.
that I could sense is ego. So that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty. I could spot
Mm-hmm.
that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in life in general, how do you know what is ego
Well,
driven?
ego, I mean, so ego describes the conscious self, the thing that dreams and wants and has all the just if someone has an ego wound, from childhood, and let's say they want their son or daughter to make the cut at the baseball team or something like that they'll be putting their ego wound onto their kid.
Right,
So
right, right.
usually, that your ego is an ego is not a bad thing. An ego, like when you were sitting down for 10 years in those cafes writing, you were building all these skills, and you were driven by a hellhound that says, I've got to get there, I've got to get there. And then you
Yeah.
got there. And so that was good. That was good, but it wasn't,
Wait,
didn't
let's
feel
pause.
very
Let's
good.
pause it. Let's pause there for a second. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I did get there, and that, I don't know if that's a false belief, or if that is, through my own lenses. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like I got somewhere, but I don't know if
Well,
I got there. You know what I'm saying? Like, because
well,
the
okay.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So right now, your ego is speaking because you wanted to be a screenwriter.
Yes,
And your ego is saying, but I didn't I didn't become a famous screenwriter. That's the ego. And I'm
right.
saying, but John, you became a really successful writer. You learned to put a sentence together in a beautiful way, and you learned to express yourself in a beautiful way. You definitely got there. You just didn't get there in a way that served your ego as much, not as much. So
Mm,
right now, in this moment, you are bringing your ego. You're bringing your ego lens to that question, and you can usually tell when the ego is at work when you're bringing in outside material that doesn't necessarily seem connected to the situation, because the situation is that John is a successful writer by any standard, and That's the information. That's the data. That's raw. That's right there. But your ego is saying, no, 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 no. I didn't become a successful screenwriter, so it was all for naught. And it's just so preposterous. And you can see, usually you can tell when the ego is messing things up because it kind of looks, if you really map it out in your head a little bit, in a kind of a mathematical way, it looks really ridiculous. It just looks ridiculous. And I mean, you know the Metallica analogy. You know about that story
Mm-mm,
about
mm-mm.
I think
The
it was the
band,
drummer or the. Say again.
the band Metallica.
The band, yeah, Metallica.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the band Metallica kicked early on in their career. They kicked out either the drummer or the bass player, or one of the guitarists for drug use, I believe.
Mm,
And he went out and he started his own band. And his problem was that he never thought he would be successful in life unless he was as successful as Metallica. And no matter
mm,
how successful he got, he never thought he was successful.
right.
The band that he started was Megadeth, which is
Mm-hmm. Wow.
one of the most successful metal bands in history.
Wait, but wait,
And if
was it? It wasn't commercially more successful than Metallica, was it? I
Of
don't
course
know.
not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But probably not. But who cares?
yeah. Right, but it was
It's
still
like it's
Megadeth, right?
preposterous. But
Right.
it's so that's how you know that you know the ego's at work when it's just like there's something really preposterous about what you're saying. Like it's just like no, come on. When there's outside stuff, when there's childhood stuff at work, when there is other people's opinions at work, when there's society's standards at work, when it seems to be disconnected from the core issue at hand, that's how you know the ego is doing its thing. And
So
sometimes
let me
it's
ask you
good.
this: if I feel that I got lucky, right, as a published writer,
Mm-hmm.
is that ego? Is that insecurity?
100%. one
That
hundred
is
percent.
ego as well. So because
100%.
I think a lot of people have the misconception that ego means grandiosity. It
No,
means
no, no.
arrogance. It means
Ego is no. That's a subset of the ego. So the ego is just your everyday conscious self that has desires and dreams
mm-hmm,
and needs. We have an ego need for companionship. We have an
yeah,
ego need for just
sex.
sex, whatever.
Yeah.
Those are ego needs. So the deeper you, the sort of the Buddha you, the internal self, like the classic example I would say would be Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech that came from his self, that came from the depths of his soul. There's not a lot of ego in that speech. It's just like bam. That's why it works
Right,
so
right,
beautifully.
right. Like
And
it
so
almost like the speech almost manifested through him, like he was a vessel.
exactly,
Wait, but
exactly,
hold
and
on. So when you said, so when you said ego, and I said sex, and you said that's ego,
mm-hmm.
wouldn't that also wouldn't food, sex, dopamine, like wouldn't that stuff be desire? I mean, wouldn't it be needs, like fulfilling needs, not so much ego?
Yes. So, but the thing is that the ego has become pejorative. So the problem is that we associate the word ego with something bad. There's nothing wrong with having
Hmm.
an ego need. The problem is that when ego needs take over the whole show and are,
I see.
it's like
Hijacks you.
it's hijacks everything, because there's a time and a place to fulfill an ego need, and there's a time and a place to put it aside. And if you don't know the difference, you're never going to be able to discern which direction to go in. And so when you are dismissing, when you're saying, "Oh, I just got lucky," what you're doing is you're saying, "I feel like," you're clinging to a narrative that I failed as a writer, I failed as a screenwriter,
Right.
because you're clinging to that because your ego took such a hit. You spent 10 years writing with no success that you've clung to this narrative of John didn't make it.
Yeah.
And the fact that and when you say I got lucky, so there's a cognitive dissonance that's nascent in you, which is that you clearly have made it as a writer,
There's
and
a
you are
part of me
also
today that feels like that he got lucky as far as
that well. Then that's how you resolve the dissonance between I know I made it as a writer, but I also know I didn't make it as a writer. And so the only way to
right,
resolve that cognitive dissonance is to say, well, I got lucky. Right? Which
right.
is silly because you have made it as a writer, and you need to put that in that narrative of I'm not good enough is probably connected to a deeper wound within you that we don't have to get into today. That is, that John, that could be connected to something in your childhood, that could be connected to some
Mm-hmm.
framework in your, that you, for whatever reason, have latched onto. And so that, so a lot of times the ego stuff is not shallow at all. It can go really, really deep. But when I say, hey, John, you made it as a writer, what I'm doing is I'm challenging a deep, deep, deep ego framework in you. And that framework is pushing back hard. It's saying, no, Ben, I'm clinging to this one. I'm going to keep this.
I wonder if this, I got really lucky growing up where I grew up in the 80s, one of the only Asian kids on the block. All the Asian kids around me got really bullied and beaten up and stuff. And I didn't because I had an ability, and that ability kind of protected me, whether it was spinning on my head or riding, BMX bikes or whatever. And I wonder if this idea of fitting in is something that I kind of hold on to, or I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that's tied to any of this when it comes to wounds.
Yeah.
Always trying to fit in, whether that is with the cool kids, or when I joined the fraternity, or also just living in LA.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea of fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what if that's tied to uh, my craft, my me as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
um, feeling like I got lucky, as in I don't really fit in, but I'm trying to. If that Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I
Like, I
can't
feel
answer that
like if
question.
you're a therapist who writes self-help books, and especially if you're a bestseller, you have to have the PhD after your name. You have to have gone to an Ivy
Mm-hmm.
League school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a C student who went to Cal State Northridge with horrible
Mm-hmm.
SAT scores, and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel fraudulent, right? And so even when
Mm-hmm.
writing my own self-help book, the first
Mm-hmm.
time, it was like, I don't have a Harvard degree. What can I write that's going to be of value? Because
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm not that person, but I
Right.
am trying to fit in constantly. And I wonder,
Yeah.
with this whole angry therapist thing, I wonder if I went rogue because I knew there's no way I'm going to be the Dr. Drew, right? There's no way I'm going to be the the smart with the letters after his name kind of
Mm-hmm.
guy. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna you know, uh, shine my taint at the sun. I'm going to, you know what I'm saying? I'm
You're
gonna,
funny.
I'm gonna get on my motorcycle and meet you at the park.
That's great.
I'm gonna
But
start a blog and talk about my feelings. I'm gonna do, and I wonder if all of that is kind of a way of running away from my idea of the quote unquote therapist, because I wasn't qualified. So I'm not gonna go there. I'm just going to do my own
well,
thing because I don't fit in. Going back to this idea that I don't fit in.
yeah. I would challenge that a little bit. I would say that you have taken an end run around all that PhD bullshit, because that's what it is, by the way.
Well,
It's
I
admit.
think that's what happened indirectly. I never intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never had, like. I mean, that would take someone with a lot of
But
confidence to be like, "Hey, I'm going to challenge the system."
But what
It
I'm
was,
saying, no,
yeah.
no, I'm not saying you ran away from it. I'm saying that you actually connected with something deeper, more authentic. Because in my opinion, the whole PhD thing is a massive cultural ego construct.
Sure, sure.
And when you pointing your taint at the sun, you're kind of coming from a place of the deeper self. You're just like, I don't care, fuck you, world. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I think that's what you did. And I think that your success is attributable to the fact that you listened to something deeper. That look, when you stopped doing the screenplays, when you said, I don't care if I have a PhD, I'm going to do this anyway, you ignored a lot of ego stories. I think that your success is because you connected with something deeper.
Oh, then screenplays.
Yeah,
Right,
then
right, right.
screenplays and PhDs and all that bullshit. It's like
Yeah.
you found you came from a place of depth. You know, that's what I think. That's what I sense from you anyway.
I think I found the title to my next book. It's "Put Your Taint at the Sun." Point your taint at the sun.
That's awesome.
That could be my next book.
Oh man.
Um,
Oh boy, you
hey,
heard it here first, folks.
I don't have a clock in front of me, so you have to let me know when it's
It's 4:32.
okay. Yeah, when it hits 40. I
But
think you know what it is, and I'm really gonna put what you're saying into my back pocket
mhm,
as I turn 50, and it's definitely something that I'm aware of, and I know that I need. So what you're saying isn't new.
mhm,
It is what has been prescribed. I think for me, I'm still
mhm,
learning how to do it, and that is not chase things, which is
mhm,
something that I used to do and I talk about a lot,
mhm,
and I'm extremely impatient, so the opposite of that, and
Mm-hmm.
settling in, being grounded, being patient,
Mm-hmm.
being present,
Mm-hmm.
and focus on noticing instead of like this idea of achievement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, here's another example. I'm running. I've been running retreats lately at our vacay home in Idlewild, and I just sold out this retreat, and it's completely sold out. I have no more room. I rented an entire hotel, a motel, the entire thing I rented. It's all fully booked, and
Mm-hmm.
yet I got a couple more emails today, and I'm like, okay, I want to get two more people in. I want to get this one
Mm-hmm.
more person in. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
now rent a
Careful.
couple more Airbnb. I'm gonna get one more person
Yeah.
in, and
Be
it's this
careful.
like I
Careful.
got it. I can stop because I've already filled. I like there's no more room. I have no more beds, and now I'm
Yeah.
thinking of ways to now rent more houses just to get a few more
Yeah.
people in and get a few more people in because
And
I don't know
that's
if that's ego, if that's
that
selfish, if that's
1,000. That is 1,000% your ego, and I would be very careful with that because there's only so much of you to go around at those things, and I would
yeah.
be
I mean, I
very
do have a team,
thoughtful.
but yeah,
I would slow down and be very
yeah,
thoughtful about that kind of thing because it's cool to make money and it's cool to be popular and it's cool to like expand your projects and like that's
yeah.
awesome. Good for you. And I wouldn't say don't do it. I'm saying slow down when you feel
Or
the
or you're
ego.
saying or you're saying start a wait list, right? Which is more like
Whatever.
close the door. You don't have to like kick them out of the.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that when the ego is at play, when you wonder if the ego is at play, it's time to slow down and be more thoughtful and get more outside opinions and be more patient. Because the ego will behave very impulsively. You know, I would say, remember the Fry Festival, the Fire Festival
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right,
fiasco?
right,
That
right.
was basically a huge ego
Sure,
uh,
that was all fabrication,
insanity.
and
That was
yeah, of
all.
course.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
saying you're doing that. I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying that
That could have been
just
me for sure. That's what a that's exactly what that's an amplified John Kim production is the Fry
oh,
Festival. Yeah,
I don't
that
know
sounds
about
like
it.
me.
Well,
I don't want that to happen to me, but
no,
that
don't.
could
Let's
be
not.
it.
No, no Fire
Yeah.
Festival for you, sir. um,
You know what, there is and I needed the help of my friend Paul, but we actually were speaking of festivals. We were in the middle of creating in Vegas at Red Rock a single on purpose to festival, and we found the space, and I mean, big numbers, and we're trying to and we the website and everything, and we actually took it down because both of Paul and I, we felt it. It
hmm
was starting to become about ego, about
hmm
we were kind of losing the essence of the purpose of
hmm
um, helping single people, and now
hmm
we're trying to like create this giant festival with
hmm
headliners and all this, and
hmm
we paused it, and I
Yeah.
felt really good about it. And that was the most recent experience where I did pause. I don't know if I would have done it alone, but with the help of Paul and us both agreeing, we paused it, and it felt right and
hmm
safe and good. So
Yeah. That's the deeper self. When something feels right and good and kind of unglamorous, that's kind of when you know something deeper is at play.
let me ask you this, and we could kind of end on this because then we don't have to expand that much. What would it look like in relationships? I tend to bring everything back to that, but
hmm
that's just part of my audience. But what would it look like in relationships to check your ego? To like, how do you know
Sure.
if something is a need or you're being
Well, I
needy?
think the simplest one is like when you're having a fight with somebody, you want to be right,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's
you
the
want to
obvious
be
one,
right.
right?
Yes, that's an obvious one. Um, when you're really not thinking about the other person, you're really not thinking about the health of the relationship. I think that all relationships suffer because when people have conversations that harm the relationship because all they're thinking about is their needs in the moment, whatever those needs are, whether they want to be
Right,
right, whether they
right.
want to be heard, whether they want to exact revenge on their spouse or hurt their spouse or something like that. People damage the relationship, and it's
Do
when
you
they
think? Do you
stop.
think that? Do you think we should not have needs in a relationship, or do you think there are
We
some
need
actual
to,
legit
but
needs?
but 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 there's a point where I think everybody knows internally when you're headed down a path with your partner that's damaging, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, that kind of stuff. And I
Hmm.
think everybody knows on some level that they're doing that when they're doing that. And yeah, you do have needs, and you do have a right to get your needs met. But if you are needs are not getting met, and your demand to get those needs met is going to harm the relationship, you got to be careful. Of course, sometimes the needs are going to be really acute. Like, what if the person's being really abusive, or the person is, neglecting you? Then you have another. Then you might go down a different path. Like, well, if this is the thing, then maybe we need to go to couples therapy, or in other words, just people will just set fire to everything around them in their desire to get their needs met, and that's almost never a good thing.
Mm.
Basically, because it destroys. If you're destroying your life, if you're destroying the structures around you and the relationships around you in service of what you want, you are probably in trouble. If I had to
Yeah,
sum it all
that's
up.
really, I'm letting that set in. Destroying things around you or setting fires in service of what you want. How do you know if you are setting fires or if you're leading a
Because
church?
you know when things are breaking. It's like saying, how do you know when you
Mm,
come home and all your dishes are smashed? You know when you've broken shit.
right,
Everyone
right,
knows that.
right.
Everyone, and anyone who says they don't's lying. People, you know when you've broken something. You know when you've fucked up, and if you don't know it, you will know it sooner or later. You know, um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's my position.
Ben, what time is it?
It is 4:39.
Okay, we have 60 seconds. Can I introduce you, since this is our first um, conversation that's
Mm-hmm.
public?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, or why don't you introduce yourself? Okay, so one of the reasons why I am seeing Ben, I've seen many therapists in my life,
Mm-hmm.
is because I was interested in union. I was interested in depth psychology. I was interested in, Joseph Campbell. I was interested in all of that kind of stuff, which Ben specializes in, and that's why I wanted to see you. I've never
Mm-hmm.
seen a therapist that specializes, or that went to Pacifica and has that depth psychology lens. So
Yeah.
um, that's why I called Ben. And tell us just a little bit about yourself. You also have a podcast as well.
Yeah, I have a podcast. It's called Look, Just Tell Me What to Do. It's available on most platforms. It's all about mental health and improving your mental health. Covers everything from, dating to drug addiction to I interview a garbage man about his everyday experiences.
Sounds
So
like me.
yeah, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been
Yeah.
licensed since 2014. I am not technically a Jungian analyst. I don't belong to the Jung Institute. My father did. He was a
Mm.
psychiatrist who belonged to that organization, and he was deep into that stuff. So I was kind of raised in that philosophy. I also saw a Jungian analyst for nearly 30 years, which is a lot of years for somebody who's only 48 years old, because
Yeah.
usually
Wow.
people don't come to that until they're much older. But I
Yeah.
started with him when I was, I think, 14, 13,
Wow.
14.
That's crazy.
So and I love what I do. I very much get into the dream analysis stuff. I'm kind of an odd mixture of sort of goal oriented, do it this way therapy, like this is just telling what to do therapy, and very open
Yeah.
ended
Yeah. Yeah.
and
You're
kind of
very
getting
direct,
into.
like I am. Which I
Yeah, I would
which I do
say.
appreciate. What
Yeah.
where can people get a hold of you as we end? If you want to give out
You can
your
email me at
yeah.
Benjamin Russack, that's BenjaminRussack at gmail.com.
Cool.
Heck, you can give me a call at 415-497-1908.
Oh my God. You're
Hey, why not?
nuts. You're giving your phone
I
number out?
Well, you can
I
get
love
it
it.
out if you want.
Hey,
You
no,
can
I'm not editing that shit out. Hey, everyone, call Benjamin.
call Ben.
Call Ben on his
Uh,
phone. I want that shit to ring all night.
no, no.
Um,
I have a website, benjaminrussick.com,
yeah,
and that's pretty much it.
cool.
And I do a lot of writing myself, and I do jujitsu, and I love to cook, and I'm a regular human being, and I'm a very open book. So
Are,
I'm not one of those therapists who just sort of sits there and nods and says, "Oh yes, how does that make you feel?"
yeah. Are you also going to give out your home address? No, I'm kidding.
What's my
No,
office
no,
address in
no,
San
no, 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 no.
Francisco?
No, no, no. Hey, one thing I didn't know about you, which excites me and I think is fabulous, is that you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's awesome.
Yeah, you didn't know that? I thought we talked about
No,
that.
no, we don't have time
Oh,
to talk about it now, but
okay. Well, let's
I'm
not.
envious of that because when I started CrossFit,
Uh
I
huh.
if I had I don't regret starting CrossFit. I still do it. I love it. But
Uh huh.
if I had done jiu-jitsu instead, by now, because it's been 12 years, I think I would have been a black belt. And one of my goals in life was to be a black belt at any martial art, which, and I just never had
Well,
time. And but
jujitsu is
anyway,
best started when you're older, but that's a whole other conversation. Listen,
yeah,
I'll text me later about when you want our next session. I'm assuming.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for everyone. Thank you for listening. And of course, I'm not going to record all my sessions, but sporadically, once in a while, when I can feel that my ego is low and I could do this where you know, because I don't want, if Ben and I are just tap dancing, that's because I'm paying for this. I don't want to waste my money.
All
Um,
right.
it's gonna feel fake, and so
Yeah.
the days that I feel like I could just really kind of like dance like no one's watching,
Hmm.
I may put them up. So thank you for listening. Be well.
All right. Take care, man.
All right. Thanks, man.